We'll take some time to discuss key narratives from the book, applications for college settings. Also, we will have a Q&A section, and then perspectives from the publisher, as I mentioned, along with a raffle drawing, which we will disclose the winners of after the event today. So without further ado, I would like to pass it on to Kim, who will welcome everyone and lead us into the book.
Welcome, everyone. We are so glad that you could join us today to hear about the work that Scott Bledsoe and I've been working on for the past few years. And I'd like to open up our time with a reading. And the first reading is on Tristan's story. An excerpt from the quote is shown on the screen. And note that as I read it, the words will fade. At any time, please feel free to shift your attention from the screen and just focus on the words. I come from a public high school of about 3,000 students, and only about 7 to 10 people were white. In terms of my cultural differences, I was completely shocked coming to this campus. A lot of that influenced the way I approached the beginning of my freshman year. I did not feel welcomed necessarily, but it kind of goes both ways in that I didn't allow myself to be welcomed by those around me. In my hall during my freshman year, I was 1 out of 3 minorities. So coming from a high school of minorities, I didn't know how to interact with white people, and I held so much of myself back. I was always told during freshman year, oh yeah, the community here is awesome. But once I got to campus, I didn't feel that sense of community. I feel like I had to always smile and pretend to be happy. But honestly, I felt left out all the time. A lot of times I'd see people in conversations and try to enter into them, but it was never something that I related to. And whenever people would talk within the group, no one would ever make eye contact with me either. And that made me feel like my humanity was just taken away from me.
I remember when I first heard Tristan's story and how much it impacted me. As a white male who attended college many years ago with mostly other white students, I didn't have the same experience from a racial standpoint, but his story touched me and really helped me connect to his journey on a deeper level. Now I'd like to invite you all to listen to a key paragraph in the first chapter of our book, which is itself a welcoming and invitation to take part in the storytelling process. As Kim said earlier, part of the text will appear on the screen. Our stories make us unique. Some are laser focused, pointing their light in singular directions that build on specific goals and outcomes. Others are more like floodlights that spray their beams in 1,000 different directions. To cultivate this process of illumination, our stories need to be nurtured, told, listened to, and written down. When they touch the lives of others, such as during times of storytelling, we often find that ours take on deeper meaning as well. In a sense, narratives are like soft clay that can be ground to dust or shaped into immense figures. So this book was the culmination of many shared stories, experiences, and projects that Kim and I have worked on, both collectively and individually. For almost 14 years, the two of us have published articles together, conducted research, and presented at many conferences and community workshops. On my end, I have taught cultural diversity for the Marriage and Family Therapy program at our university for 12 years in an area of Southern California that's about 20 miles from our main campus. It is a traditionally conservative area, and as such, I've always taught students from a broad range of cultural and ideological backgrounds in this course. Over many years and countless discussions, I've learned a lot about engaging students in rich dialogue on the topic of cultural diversity.
And a few years ago, Scott and I conducted a qualitative study of 20 undergraduate students from our institution. These students shared their experiences of cultural diversity and how it's shaped their lives. From this study, our work evolved into the book, in which we were just thrilled to be able to more fully share the voices of our participants. We carefully selected 5 of these stories and have woven them throughout our book to give readers a true sense of not just diversity in college, but how culture-based stories are shaped throughout the lives of our university students. In the book, these students are named Lena, Darnell, Alice, Sheila, and Talia. But note that all names and locations have been de-identified, and some narratives have been combined at strategic places. This is explained in the preface section of the book.
Now, additionally, a few years earlier, I started a project called the Diversity Mosaic Experience, or DME, in which I videotaped culture-based stories of students, faculty, staff, administrators, and alumni at our university. Tristan's story, told earlier, was actually one of the first videos I made. Now, through this process, I learned so much about how diversity impacted the lives of others in areas such as ethnicity, culture, sexual identity, ability and disability, and microaggressions. These stories are now part of a special page on our school's website. Now, through these projects, the cultural diversity class, the qualitative study that Kim and I conducted, and the DME, the 2 of us have realized the potential for helping college students better understand the complex world of cultural diversity.
Thanks, Scott. Now I'd like to transition us into chapter 1 of the book. In chapter 1, we introduce 2 key frameworks to help understand our stories. And I want to share one of them with you now. We start with an overarching narrative that contains any number of stories related to that narrative. For example, each of them has 1 or more narratives about racial identity that contains countless stories. Our beliefs represent what we think to be true about ourselves and the world around us. Beliefs about race can be shaped by our upbringing, geographic location, political and religious affiliation. Values are principles and standards of behavior that guide our actions. Personal values such as honesty, respect, courage, and trust take root in childhood and are often instilled in us by our parents.
Schemas represent our internal representations of the world that help us organize information in ways that make sense to us. A simple schema about race might be, my skin color is the same as those within my ethnic group, while a more complex one would be, my ethnic group experiences more or less privileges than those in other groups. And finally, emotions fill out the human experience and highlight our feelings at any given moment. Race can bring up a range of emotions such as happiness, sadness, anger, anxiety, jealousy, love, anticipation, and loneliness that work together to shape our stories. Illuminating these 4 factors gives students the opportunity to discuss not just their opinions, but the stories that give them power. As such, the personal narrative framework can help students better understand how they view themselves and their racial identity. It can also help them see similarities and differences when they share their stories, which is an important first step in establishing dialogue with others. Now, this framework provides a map not only for understanding the stories of others, but for better understanding our own stories as well. Now, we want to share an example of what this looks like in our book.
Thank you both for the overview of the personal narrative framework. At this point, I would like to comment on the framework and how it helped me understand the important aspects of our stories. I would say that of the 5 main narratives in the book, the one I most identified with was Alice, who is biracial with an African American mother and white father. Alice was a senior undergraduate student at Azusa Pacific University. Now I'd like to share a part of her story and describe how the narrative framework helped me understand her story better. Quote, "The program I was in did not emphasize race or diversity, so I set out to have the conversations and share ideas with people and friends of different backgrounds. As an example, one of my best friends is a very dark-skinned, grew up in an Asian country. She introduced me to the term colorism and told me that when she goes back home to visit family, they make fun of her for having dark skin and tell her to use different soaps and lotions to lighten her skin. In comparison, I spoke to her about being aware of my own skin color growing up. As a light-skinned girl in the Black community, I have advantages that dark brothers and sisters don't have, whether it's in white or other communities trusting me more because of my skin tone, or whether my beauty is being epitomized or fetishized as an object of exoticness. It's been really cool to have some different conversations on topics like these," end quote. So from this quote, I gained an understanding of Alice's self-motivation to explore ethnic and cultural issues. I also gained insight on her experience of discrimination based on skin color. Alice's story is presented and developed throughout the first few chapters of the text. And in chapter 4, the book presents a summary of key stories, beliefs, values, schemas, and emotions as part of her racial narrative framework in the context of her college experience. Now I would like to walk through these components of Alice's story in the context of the framework that Dr. Bledsoe previously introduced. Here, I will highlight some of the notations you are seeing in the illustration on the screen. The book discusses that Alice grew up in a predominantly white community and her parents did not emphasize the importance of cultural identity. As seen on the illustration here, Alice formed the beliefs that it was inappropriate to discuss race and that assimilation was more ideal than accepting and expressing her cultural uniqueness. Despite the fact that these topics were not openly discussed, Alice was still part of a healthy and loving family growing up. Therefore, the values represented on this illustration include harmony, scholarship, education, and being faithful to others, as those were particularly important to her in guiding her actions. Unfortunately, Alice experienced discrimination and microaggressions because she looked different from most others in her community. Therefore, on the illustration, some of the emotions within her racial narrative framework include joy associated with being with her friends, but also shame due to standing out from the majority in her environment. From Alice's inability to openly discuss ethnic and cultural topics at home to the discrimination she faced resulting from societal labels, the schemas found on the illustration, including that parental love is conditional and that African Americans can be targets of racial biases, were included in her framework. These schemas illustrate how Alice internalized her feelings of shame, resulting in issues of self-worth and her belief that being Black was the dishonorable family quality. Overall, I would say that Alice's framework also helped me understand key aspects of my own background. I found myself intentionally reflecting on my own experiences and stories throughout the book. Now, I would like to turn things over to Kim, who will discuss the applicability and relevance of the book.
Thank you, Jessica, for sharing about Alice's story. As you could see from the two stories we shared, the students shared so much about their backgrounds, their experiences, their upbringings that they took to the college and university environment. This framework for understanding narratives from these 5 college students, as well as other narratives, really give material to be utilized in the classroom for dialogue. It also presents some historical precedents for stories. Developmental stages are important as well for understanding student narratives. And then diversity honoring administrative practices is one of the chapters that really helps faculty, staff, and administrators better understand how to engage in diversity, racial, and ethnic discussions in the classroom. And then finally, classroom activities and exercises are embedded in the chapters, in each of the chapters, that help course instructors and faculty members to be able to begin dialogues within the classroom among students and faculty, instructors, to really share understanding. And these are, oh.
Sorry, I moved ahead too fast. I interrupted. Sorry, Kim. So thank you so much, Kim, for sharing that. And thank you, Jessica, for bringing out that powerful aspect of the book as well. So the way I see it, our country gets more and more divided and polarized each day. Many who enter college are firmly entrenched in the sides they were born into. And yet, universities provide an opportunity for students from different sides to engage and really highlight the importance of diversity on many levels. The college setting is a microcosm of the world in which kind of students are able to develop their identities, and it's influential in growing our understanding and appreciation of the other and one another, and seeing others on a deeper level. College reinforces the necessity of engaging in dialogue about painful events that continue to plague our nation, such as racial injustice, anti-Asian hate crimes, and the murder of George Floyd. Now, in our book, we devote a chapter to dialogue and really encountering the stories of others. We provide a diagram that we've adopted from the work of other authors that differentiates between discussion, debate, and dialogue. So let's look at what we provide. This chart kind of broken up in a few parts. If you look at discussions are informative, a conversation among strangers. It can be open or closed, aim for exchange of information, involve personal experience, and down here you'll see that, yes, a topic is explored. Debate is oppositional. There are political engagements, close-ended with a winner. It aims to beat the other. Personal experience is uncalled for, may be attacked, and a side is picked and viewpoints become entrenched. On the other hand, dialogue is collaborative. It is deep and often transformative. It's open-ended, aims to grow in understanding by sharing viewpoints. Personal experience is central, and common ground is found. And as you review this diagram, it should be pretty obvious that of the three, the one that most people tend to prefer is debate. Okay, probably we could all say that if you all you got to do is turn on the news. And yet, to truly engage with the other, especially around difficult stories, it is essential to practice dialogue when addressing these topics in classrooms. So finally, I just wanted to say a word about the organization of the book. There are 10 chapters in this book with 4 key sections. Section 1 is titled Diversity Stories, Setting the Stage. Section 2 is 5 student journeys, including Alice, who Jessica discussed previously, and 4 other students. Section 3 is From Boardrooms to Classrooms, Expanding Diversity Strategy. And finally, Future Narratives. So together, our aim is to provide a blueprint to help readers navigate the important task of bringing authentic dialogue about cultural diversity to college campuses. So now I'd like to turn it over to Jessica to begin the moderated discussion.
Thanks to Scott and Kim for giving us a glimpse into this book and its relevance to the topic of cultural diversity. Now I would like to ask the authors a couple of questions. First, how can instructors apply this book in a classroom setting?
I can take that question, Jessica. That's a really good question. I think as we had shared, we have a plethora of stories and content in the book and application exercises that instructors can readily embed into their course content and lectures to be able to introduce dialogue and discussion about different diversity content. And I think utilizing any of the 5 stories in the book at any stage in the chapters can really be relevant and really be just a way to widen the lens of the participants in the classroom.
Thank you, Kim. I guess I would just add to that that chapter 1 really takes time to open up the narrative framework and should give a kind of a sense of the power of narratives, which we've talked about a little earlier. You mentioned the exercises at the end of the chapter to reinforce learning. But I would also say that for instructors who teach cultural diversity, there's many ways and many activities that kind of take through the process. But even for instructors who teach different courses and beyond diversity, there are ways of bringing up this conversation, this important dialogue, even if there are only short amounts of time in each class session as well.
Both great answers. I would also like to add, I'm currently attending Dr. Bledsoe's History and Systems of Psychology class, and we were assigned in class to read chapter 2 of the book several weeks ago, and then in small groups we answered prompts such as how would you define your cultural identity and which narratives in the chapter stood out most for you. And having that time in class to discuss these topics in a small group allowed us the space to really share some of our personal experiences and learn of the differences and similarities in our backgrounds that we might not have explored otherwise. I'm in a program where our cohort hasn't met in person yet since due to the pandemic, everything has been through Zoom. So we really cherish those moments to be able to bond as a cohort and get to know each other a little better. And I would say we had about 20 minutes for the discussion, and that time just flew by. It was very refreshing to have the opportunity to share our stories, to ask questions, and to just learn from each other's unique perspectives. And although those discussions were initially a bit awkward, just being in a new group of people, a new environment, it ultimately led us to the ability to create a safe space where we're able to come together every week and have these deep and meaningful conversations. And so along with that, I do have a second question. Cultural diversity can be an uncomfortable topic for many instructors and students. How can this book create a desire for more engagement in this area?
I think I would.
You want to take this one first?
Sure. I can start with that one, and I can certainly understand when we look at it is just a very complex topic that's very relevant, and when you think of cultural diversity, there's a lot of emotions, a full range of emotions that are experienced, and I think a number of times instructors are that may give them pause to bring up this topic or allow students to kind of really kind of journey into this area. And I think the way to do this, rather than saying, well, folks, the best thing is just not to be emotional, let's be happy about that, that's really not going to work at all. What I believe is that the most important piece in the most important way is really working on establishing a safe place for dialogue within the classroom, that whether it's for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 5 minutes in that regard. And there's a lot of ways, there's a lot of literature about helping students dialogue within that framework. I love how Jessica kind of mentioned how she and her group were able to utilize some of these ideas around a safe space to really generate a deep and embodied discussion, despite the awkwardness at the beginning, as she mentioned. And so the idea is that I believe most instructors, if not most, really do want to get to know their students, do really want to know their journeys. But I think there's the levels of complexity, as I said, the emotions that maybe make it fearful to journey to go that road. and yet with some guidelines, which I will say we do spend in a chapter 8 really focusing on. I think this will be a helpful tool in kind of bringing out kind of true engagement in this area.
Thank you, Scott. And I would agree. I think that setting the stage in the classroom is very important, especially with a topic such as cultural diversity. Students and instructors may approach the topic with discomfort. And as a longtime faculty member in social work, I think that it's very important to be able to really intentionally engage students and say that, hey, you know what, this time together is about sharing greater understanding about one another. And in my field in particular, the goal of sharing understanding when it comes to diversity and difference is to be more effective with the individuals and communities that I'm training my students to be able to affect change in. And for example, I teach a social work in healthcare practice course, and our students are preparing to work with patients who come from all different walks of life, all different racial and ethnic and cultural backgrounds. Imagine if a student such as Tristan goes into an environment in which he has very little familiarity, how uncomfortable that might be. And as Scott had mentioned earlier, this microcosm that we create in the college environment, in the classroom and beyond, is so important to preparing our students to be able to broach dialogue that has maybe historically been uncomfortable or untouched. And as an educator, I feel it's my responsibility to be able to help our students to be able to navigate through and journey with one another, to listen to stories that give us greater understanding of one another, and then more effectively help others outside of the college campus.
Thank you both for your answers. And so now we would like to welcome questions from the audience. So this will begin our Q&A portion of the event. And I do have a couple of questions so far, so we will try to get through as many as we're able to. The first question I have is, how has the COVID-19 pandemic highlighted or even increased the need for research covered in your publication?
What an excellent question. When you mentioned about the change, the massive change that went through, has gone through higher education, the university and college settings over the past year since COVID-19. And in a lot of ways, I think what that question really leads to is just the necessity of dialogue, realizing that so many of us have been isolated, that as groups, we, instead of being in a classroom with students, instead of kind of interacting in a campus setting or even going out to regular shopping malls, a lot of us have been sequestered, in kind of our own setting. So which makes it that much harder to be able to interact with that in that aspect as well. Add to that a seminal and tragic event that happened last spring, the murder of George Floyd. It really brought up the need for discussion around the topic of cultural diversity and about so many aspects of that as well. And the part of the frustration is that rather than having that in classroom space to kind of discuss that, a lot of it had to be done over Zoom or remotely as well. So I think we had to get, the instructors had to get creative, and curriculum had to be changed quickly. And it is a work in progress, but I think it just shows how important the idea of the COVID-19 and that the era that we've been through has kind of shaped our thinking in that way. In many ways, kind of making us kind of more, kind of distant from each other in that regard.
Yeah, I would definitely agree, Scott. I think the pandemic has really put us in uncharted waters, hasn't it? Where our students, our campuses have been isolated and has been disconnected in so many ways. And when we think about um, racial, cultural topics, and thinking about just the political landscape, it is so much more important that as educators, we find ways to continue to engage our students in discourse that is respectful, that is that joins our students together. It is often very difficult to navigate our student discussions when there are uncomfortable topics anyway. And I'll just speak from myself. From experiencing a year of teaching classes on Zoom, I've had to be pretty creative with how I engage students. And I'm going to go back to starting with kind of establishing ground rules, establishing expectations, and then also modeling, you know, that mutual respect for one another. We may not agree on all levels, and that is okay, right? Our job as educators is to be able to engage our students in critical discourse, to engage our students to critically examine their own experiences as they put it out to share with others.
And so there's another question that I have. How do you intend to continue the dialogue you have begun with this book?
Jessica, could you repeat that? How do you, I missed the last part of that. Sorry about that.
Sure. It's how do you intend to continue the dialogue you have begun with this book?
Well, that's a great question, and Kim and I have been excited, you know, about not only the book itself, but some of the reaction to the book as well. So I think moving forward with that, we want to see that this book would hopefully wind up in many classrooms. We're looking at different kinds of programs within schools, whether it's as I mentioned, you know, singular classrooms, or you know, cultural diversity, or non-diversity race classrooms, being able to bring narratives to life, even in small amounts of time as well. But broadening that, I know that our school kind of supports a first-year seminar program for freshmen, for incoming freshmen. So we would hope that that this book would serve as a way of kind of ushering in, you know, incoming freshmen right as they come into into the school setting, to really learn how to engage in dialogue and storytelling as well.
And I'll just add to that that I hope that this is just the beginning of many dialogues that we will have on campus. And we hope that the book itself serves as maybe opening discussion, maybe to serve as examples of students' experiences on our campuses and beyond. We know that our Chief Diversity Officer is very supportive of our work, and he really models for us just the priorities of the university to engage in a journey together, right? To have a campus that is embracing of respectful discourse, to understand one another, and to create a college campus that is embracing and inclusive of all who attend.
Great, thank you. Another question: what have been the most impactful responses you've received to your book and the studies about the students within it?
Well, I'll share that. I saw in the chat box that somebody said she read our book and it's awesome. Thank you for that comment. Go ahead, Scott.
Well, I'd just like to say I have shared, you know, I've shared my book with colleagues. The ones who've read it have many, or a few of them have just said how much that they've enjoyed it. I think probably where I've gotten the most kind of input is from having students from two different classes kind of read the book, and then reflect on the book in groups with other students. Through reflection papers, through discussions as well. And I've gotten a sense from the students themselves how much the narratives have impacted them and their learning, as well as getting off of what Jessica said earlier, is that it was the narratives that came through, even through historical dialogue, even through events that have happened over hundreds of years. The way that narratives have taken shape on an individual level, but on a global level as well, I think has really touched people to hear those stories, and to kind of hear the way those stories kind of connect with kind of broader and even global events as well, have been very impactful as well. So it's so exciting to hear that kind of feedback about the book, and to me that just kind of shows me what kind of potential there is, for future kind of dialogue and discussion about this important topic as well.
Yeah, and I'll just briefly add to Scott's comment that I too have had some very impactful responses from colleagues on campus and at other campuses as well, that the narratives themselves have been so very powerful, and that they would be used as the launching point, right, for maybe course discussions, course activities. I think that our colleagues have been very receptive and very excited about really taking that approach. In my profession, we use a lot of client or case vignettes. So it's very, very familiar to me to be able to start with the vignette, to start with the story and unpack that together. So likewise, I think that many of my colleagues have really appreciated just how we've woven in the 5 student stories throughout, so that there's some depth that an individual can pull a piece of the story at any given point of the book.
And I just want to add just one piece to that, because I really like how you said that, Kim, is that a part of it is as powerful as these narratives are, the importance is that students and readers can connect their own stories to these narratives that they're reading. If these narratives in the book exist in some kind of isolation, alone, I think that's okay. They're powerful narratives, but I think the most important part is really kind of bringing in these student journeys and having them compare their own differences and similarities, and inviting them to share their own stories as well. So we want to add that piece as well.
So true. Thanks, Scott.
And it looks like we have time for 1 or 2 more questions. So I will ask this one: how might we as psychology educators, trainers, utilize this text to encourage empathy and perspective taking for students along opposite ends of the political orientation spectrum? Our program does well with encouraging dialogues with respect to other aspects of diversity, but we continue to be challenged in creating a climate that is safe for all across political orientations and ideological perspectives.
Yeah, that is such a wonderful question. I think that question immediately takes me back to my kind of yearly experience, teaching cultural diversity. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of it, I do have the time within those settings. For 10 years, it was in face-to-face, and in the past 2 years, it's been via Zoom. And yet a part of it is that encouraging students to be in groups and again, modeling ways to listen without judging and without being judgmental of the stories of others, realizing that as each of us share our stories, we're not going to agree with the outcomes. We're not going to agree with those as well. And I think that helps to kind of engage the students who do feel on the margins as well, whether being on the left side or the right side as well. We have a whole kind of spectrum of that. And I think feeling invited into that environment is so important. I think once students get the message, you do not belong here at this table, okay? Once they get that message, then they will they can be angry, they will feel left out, they'll hurt, they will react, sometimes react with rage. And yet the reality is that making that table such that we can explore that dialogue is so integral to these conversations as well. I so appreciate that question. I would like to say it works in 100% of the time. It does not. And yet I believe that the power is that there are a lot of people who do feel like they are that they don't belong at that table. That by the end of it, that by semester's end, they really do feel that they have a part. Not always agreeing with others, but at least that they have their own place within that. And I think that is a way of kind of modeling inclusion, an inclusive environment of many students in that regard as well.
And it looks like with that, we are just about out of time for questions. So I apologize to everyone whose questions we did not get to. There were several more with us, but right now I would like to pass the mic over, or the screen over, to Caroline Campbell, one of the editors from Igi Global. Caroline.
Hello, everyone. If we could just move to the next slide. First off, I wanted to thank everyone for joining us on this webinar. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Caroline Campbell, and I am the Director of Author Relations at Igi Global, so the publisher that actually published this book. And overall, I was super excited when Dr. Bledsoe and Dr. Sutherland actually approached me for this webinar. Overall, I think we can all agree that this research not only needs to be produced, but actually shared. And, this publication and this dialogue isn't a one-fit-all solution. It's something that needs to be out within the ecosystem to continually be developed on. Obviously, for us to create inclusive learning environments, but I think more importantly, for us to actually create an inclusive society. It's extremely, extremely important. We are an international academic publisher, so I deeply believe this, for us to listen to each other's narratives and for us to continually share each other's perspectives. And also on our side, it's important for publishing houses and also institutions to continually support this research and its wide dissemination. So for those of you who are not familiar with who Igi Global is, if we can move to the next slide, I can briefly overview. So we are an international academic publisher. We were actually founded by a researcher himself. So we're very, very in line with a lot of what this presentation is around, a lot about what this publication is on as well, is really looking at research needs to be shared, especially those varying perspectives, no matter how niche it is, knowing that it needs to occur. So we do span across our 11 subject areas. This includes business, education, social sciences, and we've actually worked with over 100,000 institutions and researchers globally. So we can proudly say that we've actually published on every single continent, have a researcher that's published with us, including Antarctica, which is something interesting. But overall, we're very focused on streamlining the overall publishing process to ensure that the most relevant and most recent research is being published at the pace of the news, the rapid advancements, etc. So overall, from our perspective, we are seeing a great increase in this area of research, publishing it, also the great need for continually publishing titles around this area, which is something that I'm proud to report. So really, we're focused on, trying to find the various perspectives in general to continue this dialogue. So, it's been an absolute pleasure working with both of the editors, also Jessica on this presentation, but also on their publication, and really honing in on this mission overall. If we want to move to the next slide. I know a lot of the questions we had was actually, how do I access the book? How can I utilize this in the classroom? So I did want to just take a brief moment just to talk about the different accessibility opportunities for everyone who's on this webinar. So to make sure that it's actually available, as you know, they are going to be doing a raffle, but I would like to extend a 50% discount on this publication to all of the attendees, any of the institutions as well, through our online bookstore, which is noted at the very bottom on bottom of the slide where you can access their publication. You can simply use the coupon code IJGlobal50, and we'd like to not only extend this discount on their publication, but our overall 250 titles that focus around diversity and inclusion. Additionally, as the representative for the publisher, I'm more than happy, to work with each of you individually as well, to actually get this publication not only in your own personal libraries, but then also your institution libraries. So if anyone's interested in either making it accessible to their institution through the library, which if one copy is purchased, the entire institution will be able to access it, or any course developments, so course syllabi, getting it for their individual students, I am available to flag all of those questions. So overall, I just want to thank Dr. Sutherland, also Dr. Bledsoe, Jessica, for hosting this webinar. It's been an absolute pleasure not only working on this webinar, but continuing this dialogue as well. So if you have any questions, like I said, feel free to reach out to me. I know I'll make sure also my contact information is in that follow-up email that was previously discussed.
Thank you so much, Caroline, for that information. And I would also like to offer a moment for either Dr. Bledsoe or Dr. Sutherland to provide any closing comments that you all may wish to.
Well, I'll go first. Thank you so much for joining us on a Sunday afternoon or evening or late night, depending on where you are in the world. We really appreciate your interest in our work. We really appreciate all of the rich questions as well. As I was looking at the Q&A box, I was wishing we had more time to be able to field so many of those questions. And from those questions, I could see that you are a deeply committed audience who is committed, whether you are a faculty member, staff, administrator, or student. You are deeply committed to continuing the dialogue that we discussed today. And again, thank you. Thank you for spending this hour with us. We really, we enjoyed sharing our work with you, and we hope that you will take a sneak peek into the publication.
Well, thank you so much, Cam. Thank you so much, Caroline, for kind of bringing us into the world, your world of the publishing world. IGI has been behind us, throughout the entire way, throughout the writing of the book, the publication of the book as well. And it's been great to have Caroline and Cheyenne Heckerman, who's here as well, but also others from IGI as they've lent their perspectives, throughout and kind of lent their support for this book reading event and hopefully other events in that regard as well. Jessica, it's been wonderful to have you moderate this event, just having your own kind of thoughts about how this book has kind of touched you in certain areas. It's been so helpful for your perspective as well. We just so value and treasure that as well. And of course, Kim, thank you so much. Like I said, Kim and I have worked together for so many years. It's just, so when we decided to do this, we had worked a long time together, and we had perspectives, had to conduct a lot of different kind of research, throughout throughout the process of writing this book. But again, it was a labor of love, and we are excited to continue this journey with our Facebook page. Which it's about a day old, so it's rather new, but we've actually submitted the page. Jessica, were you able to get? I just wanted to make sure you were able to get the link in that into the chat. So everybody, please we want to invite you to join us on the Facebook page. What I'm going to do, I apologize, we weren't able to get to all the questions. I too looked at some of the questions, just wonderful. So sorry we weren't able to get all of them. We're going to work on maybe making those questions part of our Facebook page, so that we can kind of answer those hopefully kind of genuinely, authentically. And get some more information as well. Included in that page will be the recording of this event as well, and I hope to get some PowerPoint slides from this presentation as well. But in the end, it's been such an honor to have all of you kind of listen to our our presentation. Hopefully it was helpful to your understanding. It is a beginning, it's not an ending. There's so much, as we all know, there's so much work to be done in this area. I do think there's one of the lights in the end of the tunnel, getting back to the question about COVID, is that, in the fall, we will be going back. In the fall, we'll kind of be getting back on that campus, and hopefully all the dust will be cleared up and, and all in that regard. And yet hopefully that will be a new opportunity, a new venture to take this dialogue to a different level. And we're so excited about those prospects as well. Please contact us. Our email addresses are right here by email, and visit us on our Facebook page as well. Again, we want to thank you all for being here and attending as well. Thank you all so very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. And there were a few questions in the Q&A box, and I want to make sure everybody had the information. One question was, could you provide the offer code again? Caroline, can you just give that to me one more time, and I'll put that in the Q&A box?
I was going to say yes. It's going to be capital IGI and then 50.
Okay, so IGI 50.
Yeah, IGI 50.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
IGI 50. And then hopefully you got the Facebook page as well that Jessica dropped in the chat box. And I love that idea, Scott, of dropping in the questions that we weren't able to answer on the Facebook page. That's a great way to continue the dialogue as well. Great. All right. So Jessica, would you like to close us out?
I would like to again thank both Dr. Sutherland and Dr. Bledsoe for the opportunity to moderate today. I appreciate being included in this project to any extent. I think it's something that's very necessary, something that I'm also passionate about. So thank you all both for that. And finally, thank you to everyone for attending. Thank you so much for all of our attendees today. We hope that you found this presentation insightful and applicable to your own settings, educational settings and such. And again, as Dr. Bledsoe stated, I would like to remind everyone to be on the lookout for that follow-up email that will contain the information about our raffle winner from today and a recording of the presentation. So I hope all of you have a great rest of your Sunday and a great week ahead. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye, and thanks to all of you for being here.